Well, we're about to kick off our final session with the easiest name of the day, Oliver Patrick. Thank you for coming on.
A pleasure, a genuine pleasure.
And Oliver is a physiologist and health assessment expert who's focused on the measurable health and performance output of lifestyle. You're the co-founder of a fitness education business called Future Practice. You're the Wellbeing Director of Medical Business at Lattice Health, Clinical Director of luxury hotel business Pillar Wellbeing, and also you consult organizations globally. You had just come off a session.
Yes.
As well. I know that was a mouthful, but you had just come off a
You're
session.
A busy guy. I need to calm that whole bio down.
Well, I think it
outrageous.
works. I think it works. We're going to distill it. We're going to distill it down right here. You just come off a session at Europe Active, literally hot off the press, and coming on to our podcast here. So, your main theme was about fitness versus well-being and what role as an industry we need to play on disease prevention and loyalty. But I think furthermore, we were just talking before we hit record, we have to redefine who we are. We call ourselves the fitness industry, but really we throw around this term well-being, but our actions still speak to more fitness.
I agree. I think all those words need a review. Are they good words? Fitness is so enshrined in the legacy of sportiness and an aesthetic-based club. But the word itself doesn't mean anything. I mean, fitness is task-specific, not outcome-driven. Am I fit enough to get out of this chair? Am I fit enough to join, Matthew for one of his brutal weight training sessions? The answer is no.
Fitness I have not been invited to yet, so I'm waiting for it.
Give it time. Fitness is a capability. It's not a state, and that makes it it's a very odd thing to sell as a generic, this sort of generic idea of fitness. And I think wellness and well-being have got a similar premise. They're so poorly defined that they mean a different thing to everyone involved, and that makes messaging about the generic wellness benefit or fitness benefit a real challenge. And I think when we look at the people who aren't in facilities, their take on those words will be markedly different from people who are within our facilities, for example.
Or the thousands of gyms now listening that have got fitness in their name, kind of scratching their heads about how to.
I think I hear that, and I suppose as a challenge we've got to say, if we want to get the people who aren't currently in facilities, do we think we can do that as a plus model? And I think that's a challenge to me. There was a really interesting stat from one of the talks earlier that said 55% of organisations wouldn't compromise profitability for an ESG development. I think that's interesting. I'm interested in what percentage of operators would compromise their profitability for an improved effectiveness on health and wellbeing outcomes. If I said to you, I can make you 10% more effective at changing injury risk or disease risk or managing health conditions, be that a diabetes or an autoimmune disorder, but it's going to come at the cost of 10%. Of course they're going to say no. So people assume you can just leap up into well-being without any cost. And so it might be a brand challenge, that if we really want to get people who haven't come for a long time, if we hear another talk on the 80%, I think I might cry. Who's met that 80%? I have the fortune, in the world of health assessments, that health assessments are generally people who aren't in a gym, nor are they clinically unwell. So they are your general population. And they see no obvious logical benefit to joining a gym. And fitness is a word that would remove their incentive to join something rather than increase. They're interested in energy, they're interested in productivity, they're interested in longevity, they're interested in looking good for as minimum effort as possible. Where does that sit in the word fitness? So I think those businesses can do very well with fitness in their name. But I do think the idea that we can access these new markets with this new commercial opportunity with zero cost, both to brand and to operation and to operators, I think is a real challenge.
Well, I think words matter. I've always been a big believer in words as a way to communicate your brand and communicate intent. And not only intent as it relates to how it is understood within your organization, but also the priorities that an organization then executes on after that, right? So if you look at the word fitness, then you drive that word down. We are a fitness club instead of a health club. A health club is something people start talking about. Yeah. How you think about the word and how your actions then matter all throughout, from executives down to your cleaning staff. is really going to matter. I kind of really like what you talked about, this idea of general population and the health assessment. Fitness could be a turnoff. Fitness, if you ask a general public, what does fitness mean to you? Most people don't relate that with things like happiness and joy. They talk about pain. They talk about work. They talk about effort that's put in. And a lot of that has been because we've built an industry, right? And I include us in that, saying that, okay, it is this idea of no pain, no gain, right? You talked about Matthew's hard workouts, and we've learned that. We know that you've got to put in the effort to do that. But new data and new research has really shown that, okay, but even effort where you're not breaking yourself to then fix yourself back up again is needed. You no longer need to do that to achieve the longevity outcomes that you're talking about that most of the population are looking at. So what are things do you think that, or how should we be thinking about the general population? Because the other interesting fact from this morning is this penetration rate.
Yeah.
We are never going to change penetration rates, and that varies by market, if we're just focused on this fitness-only population. In order to bring more people into the fold, in order to be more inclusive, we've got to be thinking about well-being. So what are the things that this non-fitness population is thinking about, and how should we in the industry, what can we do to attract them into the fold?
It's the $1 million question. If I really had the answer, I'd be flying. I think we have to change what
you are flying. You're on our podcast.
I'm here. I'm mixing it up with you too. I think the messaging around what the benefit is does need to change. We sell an awful lot of the process, but we don't talk enough about the outcome, and that's partly because we don't measure the outcome. So I don't want to say, I'll improve your aerobic capacity and VO2 max, which will extend your length of life, if I don't measure that.
And if you don't know where you're starting from.
I don't know where you're starting from. I think data is probably almost a secondary piece, because I love the use of data strategically and sort of judiciously. But I think, what is the pain point of people? Are we talking to that enough? If we're a weight management center and you're not that fussed about your weight, we're an irrelevance. If we're a fitness center and you're not that interested in sport or whatever you've perceived fitness to mean, why would you enter this facility? If we are somewhere where you could tackle lethargy and fatigue and low quality immunity, or we're somewhere we could tackle brain fog or low sex drive, I can spin that into a general population. And that is exactly what we do. The great horror for me of this sector is the benefits we create are exponential, but the benefits we market are inconsequential. A change in the way you look, yeah, that's great, but we're changing your cellular structure when we get you fitter. We're changing, when we get you fitter, your sleep. We're changing your self-confidence and your productivity. And that secondary benefit into the corporates is, this is the ultimate win-win. If I take a group of people and I improve their fitness, we are talking points on their productivity, and offset against whatever a gym membership might cost, gym plus PT, gym plus digital support. It's a no-brainer. But we've got to then message the benefit as being beyond aesthetics, or selling something more than experience and community.
Why do you think we've got there? Because there's some brilliant people in the space, and there's some fantastic businesses, and it's the language is such an obvious one, but which I've never really thought of until we've had this conversation in the same way. But it's almost like, yeah, actually that's a terrible name. Is it just that we've always done that, and fitness, and if you want to get fit, you go to the gym, and those two words, fitness and gym, seem to go together, and that covers a whole host of different things, and even in the industry we know the benefits, but we don't talk to them. So people who don't necessarily are not in the industry and don't know the benefits are just totally confused, because they just see those two words together, and that's not what they're after.
Yeah, I think if we're just talking about fitness and the gym, we're still selling the process, and we're still dealing with the demons of those words. If I take Barbara, who's in accounts of an organization and isn't that worried about the way she looks, that could never bring her in. But if I'm an energy center, there's no doubt most people are suffering from inadequate energy. That is the modern day challenge.
Just sitting here.
We're here.
Jet lag.
You two are doing a remarkable job. So, but that's relevant, and people will buy a solution to low energy. That might be a Barocca, it might be an IV vitamin infusion, it might be
Today was a regular Red Bull, not the sugar-free version where we had regular Red Bull.
Okay, and needs must sometimes, and that reality is, that's a pain point for most people that is significantly improved, if we're taking energy, through adherence to attending my facility. If I increase your cardiorespiratory fitness by a point or two, that literally makes more batteries in every cell of your body. When we look at the sort of the science of aging, we see mitochondria, which most people try to forget about at school, but the powerhouse of the cell, we see the number and the quality deteriorating. That's one of the hallmarks of aging. But aerobic exercise increases your mitochondrial density. So we literally make more batteries. So I go and speak to an organization, if I do a corporate well-being talk, I never sell the word fitness, I'd never sell weight management. I go in on performance, productivity, energy, and then I end up at exercise. And of course, the end of every talk is like, oh God, I'm going to get my steps up because I've understood the benefit of movement now for my digestive health, and I'm wearing a blood glucose monitor, but I thought that was all about oral intake of carbohydrate, not about steps and movement expenditure. And I am suddenly incentivized to do cardio for the first time because I was told it didn't change my body physique. We already sell the most powerful intervention known to mankind. We just undermarket it, and we under-communicate about it. So I think it's a marketing and messaging challenge. There is a competency piece in there to a degree, but we've got to reframe what physical activity is. One of my slides again was, wellness isn't medical fitness. I am tired of, when people think about well-being, it's like, how do we get rheumatoid arthritis into the gyms, and how do we get, people with secondary breast cancer? I want those populations, and I think we're a critical part of their rehab pathway, but they're difficult to get. Doctors are the barrier, and they're complicated to serve. Barbara is going to end up clinically unwell, and I need to incentivize her now, 20 years before she incurs both the pain and the cost of becoming unwell. Prevention isn't finding a disease just at its onset. Prevention is stopping physiology deteriorating towards disease. And again, physical activity is the cornerstone of that. So I think, and again, that's that language piece. Someone was asking me about a well-being qualification. They're like, how can we ever manage all the different health conditions, 155,000 health conditions, whatever they might be listed. So you don't. You improve underlying physiology, and whatever they're suffering from will be less.
How do you?
Well, I was going to say, you mentioned this word assessment, and when we look at, I'm a runner and I like to ride and swim too, but we've always had the right kit, the right trackers, the right wearable, and we use those metrics to train, and it informs what we do, what intensity we do, what workouts we do. But in the gym, right, you really sell a membership, and you kind of talk about this assessment piece. It's a part of it. We have an in-body, or we've got the ability to do an assessment. But then once the membership goes, you don't really sell the value high enough where people want to come in and do it. But those of us who've been through the journey know that an assessment is so critical, because in order to know where you're going, and in order for the gym to help you, you need to know where you're starting from. But not enough people do the assessment.
I agree. And I think, we've been in the sector long enough to know we used to, and then it became labor intensive and people didn't want it. And I was like, well, it's for me as much as it's for you. I overshared on my talk on the stage, and I put up 3 parameters. And because I get asked, what do you do? Not that I'm a bastion of anyone should be following what I do, but now I've got more than 10 followers. They're asking me, what do you do? And I go, well, I've got a VO2 max quantified as 48 millilitres per kilogram, and that parameter will be the single best predictor of how long I live. And that's solid. It's not spectacular, it's solid.
So it's 40.
It's 48.
48.
48. Don't round me down. No.
No, but is that your, are you saying that 48 as being your VO2 max?
That's my VO2 max. So
okay.
My VO2 max is 48. Yeah. My skeletal muscle mass is 41 kilograms. And my mobility assessment on one of many different technologies is 85 out of 100. And
are they the 3 that you put a lot of importance on?
Enormous importance on for many reasons. Mobility is the gateway to load up a system, right? So I can't, if I pull a muscle every time I run, I'm in trouble. If I trap a nerve every time I lift, I'm in trouble. So mobility is required to reduce injury risk. That's fairly logical. So that system of biology must be preserved. And then my muscle mass and my VO2 max directly affect every single thing in my life. My muscle mass affects my testosterone level, it affects my glucose control, my bone density, my capacity to be functional, to put a suitcase above my head on a train, whatever it might be. And my VO2 max is the single, which is the objective marker of aerobic capacity, is the best single predictor of how long I live. In fact, my VO2 max is a better predictor of whether I'll develop cardiovascular disease than cholesterol, blood pressure, smoking, and one other, and glucose. Now That's wild. And the American Journal of Medicine said VO2 max should be part of all medical consultations. But of course, there's no prescription for VO2 max. So don't test what you can't change, which is a really important principle. So I put on my oversharing was, those are my 3 results. None of them are spectacular. I'm not a spectacular athlete. But I do the minimum dose of exercise to secure those 3 results. So my process is entirely driven by that outcome. So I train as little as I can. I love a bit of pickleball. I love playing tennis with my kids. I love doing park runs with my kids, but none of that's particularly overloading. I love my sociability of physical activity in my life, but that won't necessarily move the dial on those 3 parameters. And so I need to check those periodically to go, have I undervalued high intensity exercise work? Have I undervalued lifting? Have I undervalued mobility? So they provide the framework for dosage. And that challenge of, is this 1 session a week? Is it 2 sessions a week? Is it 1 Pilates, 2 weights? Can only really be answered by data. And if we're selling process, you look at what I adhere to. He turned up for the Zumba class on a Wednesday, and he turned up for the group run on the Friday, and he's got his PT session on the Tuesday. That's all great, and you can engage people in that. But you may not be enhancing them biologically. And that's a missed opportunity, considering that we have the tools to really enhance people biologically, physiologically.
And the tools have become a lot more accessible, right? So even capturing your VO2 max, if you want to go on the performance side, you can go lactate. Yeah. Like that's the more purest form of capturing it. But even talking about a CGM sensor, Abbott, who we work with, has a lactate sensor now, right? That's going to be soon to be consumer available to give you real time. That if you're into that, and you look at even things like assessments of mobility, you could now do that with potentially. You could, if you're a gym, build that into your digital product.
I think totally, and we're seeing that with Technogym, who've just added, their assessment evaluation tool. eGym were there slightly earlier with a mobility assessment, an integrated body composition measurement, and a marker of VO2 max. I work with a Danish company that does a VO2 max in 30 seconds, clinically validated, called Ventroject, from seismocardiography. So we can see that from the contractile force of the heart measured through shock waves, we can determine stroke volume, and therefore we can capture VO2 max. So, and I say that because I love gas analysis, and I love incremental exercise testing, where you can see lactate threshold or ventilatory threshold or anaerobic threshold, whatever people want to call it. But my raw result still is VO2 max. That's the one that's associated with longevity. So if I go back to Barbara, she isn't going to do a mask on her face and cycle to exhaustion, but I can get her to lie for 30 seconds and put a little sticker on her chest. So I'm interested in technology that democratizes and makes point of care measurements reproducible and accessible. Then it's down to the programming we do after that. But I think when we look at the fitness sector in particular, we mobilize people, we load them to build strength and lean tissue, and we give them cardiovascular exercise. So why are we not measuring the things we do? It's not like this is a dirty secret. We're the only people who change these parameters. So we should be out there, amplifying their significance. It shouldn't be a Journal of American Medicine saying this is the most important parameter. It should be Europe Active, it should be World Active, it should be URSA. We should be shouting about VO2 max from the rooftops. We should be shouting about sarcopenia and the loss of muscle mass, because we're the antidote. And at the moment, I don't see that being pushed enough.
Where do you see the trainers then? Because this is obviously a person-to-person experience. So, gyms are not necessarily the place where you'd always get that. What is it? 10% is pretty good for most gyms to have personal trainers. In a lot of cases, 10 to 15 is on the high side. So how do you see this? Is this just a different model to a traditional gym where it's very coaching based, it's assessment based, and everybody who goes through one of these programs, for example, is specifically working for a trainer, as opposed to what happens in most cases is you go to the gym, you rent equipment at a good price, and you figure it out through YouTube and TikTok.
I think,
and I'm not being critical of things, but that does happen
enormously, and we should be aware of that. I think if we are encouraging biological markers of if we're quantifying status quo, if I've got your VO2 max, your lean tissue, and your mobility, then you're more likely to buy my professional expertise to guide you, because what you've learned is by sort of dicking around on the equipment for 6 months, you haven't changed your biology at all. And that's, of course, why most people will leave. They'll argue, there wasn't enough touch points, or the receptionist didn't know their name. But if you're not actively changing body composition, or that wasn't your goal, why am I still going to this thing 6 months later?
There could be, you just, like for me, I'd go there to relieve stress. I feel good when I go in there, and so I'm not necessarily looking to do anything, and that, you know, you could call it mental health or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do that, and some people may.
Well, you could quantify stress levels, right? You could track, you know, stress through wearables and through other ways right now. Yeah, I have a question, you know, around your session today in terms of the progress of fusing physical activity with the physical activity sector with the healthcare sector today. Which countries do you feel are being the most progressive and effective with those efforts right now?
I don't see a brilliantly impressive model of integration. I think culturally and technically, medicine rather than health and fitness, if I call them by sort of proxy names, are so far apart. You know, that where I see integrated models, all I see is sharing of resource. We might share a building, but we don't share referral pathways in most cases. I don't. There'll be, you know, first thing caveat, I'm not globally finger on the pulse enough to tell you that that's the state of quo across multiple different nations and countries. I'm doing some work in Germany and Belgium, and there again, medicine feels very siloed from the gym, albeit their understanding of the preservation of lean mass is far greater in some of those European countries than it is in the UK. And that has led to, obviously, to the birth of companies like Milan and eGym, and the fact that those sort of weight training suites are prolific through sort of Benelux and that region, but don't really get any traction in the UK. And I think where two parties win is where we're going to get best traction. And still, for me, corporate well-being is the cleanest place. America's probably going to innovate first because, you know, it's a very clear benefit if someone doesn't develop a health condition. In the UK, it's not that clear a benefit.
It's a clear benefit because the insurance companies don't have to.
Exactly right. So the insurers in America are much quicker into, you know, using wearables to remote patient manage, and, you know, can I do predictolytics in terms of, okay, I've got you wearing a continuous blood pressure monitor 3 days after the operation. It's problematic on 2, we'll call you back in. And that seems to be the only model where there's a genuine belief that an ounce of prevention equals a pound of cure, because they're paying for it.
That's one silver lining to private insurers only. There's very few to that. You know, I guess related to that, one thing I would say that it has been transformative in the last 18 months has been the introduction of GLP-1. And through Matthew, you've talked about some of that happening in the UK as well. But in the US, we've seen gyms, some digital companies now introduce clinics. So, for example, Exponential acquiring Lindora, Lifetime opening up Miura. You know, I was just at the St. James, which is about 20 minutes from where we're based out of in Virginia. But all of them now have clinics that
Equinox
have,
as well.
you know, Equinox. Well, Equinox has training on it, but or they're embracing that. And I think, to me, GLP-1, if I were to say that, like what ChatGPT did to bring up AI into the mainstream, GLP-1 has kind of forced or pushed our industry into healthcare more quickly than anything else that I've seen. So I'm optimistic that, you know, hopefully it's going to bring our two industries together more quickly.
I agree. I think that's a really good point. And I think COVID was the missed opportunity for personal accountability over well-being, in terms of I can boost my immune system through quality sleep, weight management, vitamin D, developing my gut microbiome, rather than stay home and we'll save you. You know, there was this sort of idea that healthcare was this passive process that we received. So I was sad to see that opportunity broadly missed. I think GLP represents another one within a generation, which is here we have a final reason to engage with the general population about the benefit of weight training. You know, really, and the sort of data is fairly equivocal that, you know, you don't secure as much muscle mass as we would like in that weight loss. So if you don't weight train while losing weight on GLP-1, you will be less healthy.
Well, I think you lose about 40% of muscle on GLP-1 weight loss compared to 20% in regular weight loss.
And that is critical. So if I lose 10 kilograms of weight, the loss of 4 kilograms of lean tissue is outrageous from a bone density point of view, from a glucose control point of view, from a metabolic health perspective. So I think we have a real window of opportunity to become an outlet for those clinics. How the commercial operating model of that, whether you embed it or whether you train your staff or whether you promote a specific membership category, I think there's so many different ways to try it, but we should be banging on the door of medicine to say, send us your GLP-1s, because without us, it's a less effective intervention. And that's a nice, clean, concise message that they can get on board with. I think, we all know at the moment it's a fairly elite product at the price point due to scarcity, and as that either comes off patent and there's a new version coming out which is much more affordable, we'll see that move out of the top tier operators and become something that big box operators naturally start to push towards. So I think that's a chance to bridge that gap. It's still, speaking to Europe Active today, I'm saying we shouldn't be sat waiting for medicine to send us people. We have to be a little bit more pronounced in going out and saying, you've got to be the ones who want to come to us, and it's for these myriad of benefits. If we're waiting for the referral pad, or the prescription, I think it's going to be a long time still coming, just because of how difficult it is to operate medical services in this current climate.
Well, we could really go on for a long time with this one and have a dedicated interview. I think maybe we'll have to get Oliver back again. There's a lot to think about there, and really appreciate you coming at the end of the day and sitting down and talking to us. I think it's time for a beer now.
It's very much time for a beer. Also, I'm so underdressed for this appointment. The two of you are raising the game.
Well, I raised my game because of Matthew.
Smartest men in Europe Active, without a shadow of a doubt. Thanks,
thank you, Oliver.
Thanks, Oliver.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, man.